Coaches, good evening. Welcome to the Coach Gibbs Defensive Lab. We're switching gears. We're going to the offensive side of the ball. Coach Derickson from Eastern Illinois. Coach and I have followed each other on social media. I've communicated about players and recruiting and just talk some ball. So, Coach, thank you for taking the time. I know you're in the thick of it in spring ball, and I'm just happy to get you on for a little while to talk some football.
Appreciate you having me.
This is awesome, man. So, Coach, people that are going to listen that, obviously there's guys that know where you've been at. There's some guys that might know a little bit, some guys that don't know anything. So just talk to you about your journey and how you got to be the OC at Eastern Illinois.
Yeah, well, I mean, I played offense when I was at Butler University and was a receiver. And, Coach, you're not veering too far because my first job was on the defensive side of the ball at my high school. My head coach, who's one of my best friends, or he's the head coach there, he was my defensive coordinator, brought me back and said, hey, you need to learn the other side of the ball. You've been entrenched in the offense. So I coached DBs for a season and then became the defense coordinator at the high school for 3 seasons before I made the jump to the college level. And at the college level, I started out as a defensive GA for Tim Lester, who, is currently the OC at Iowa, but he was the defensive coordinator at North Central College, prominent D3 up there in the Chicagoland area. And I was his GA for all of 3 months. And then he got the head coaching job at Elmhurst University, there in Chicago. And he's like, hey, we're going back to the offensive side of the ball. So short stint at the college level on defense. But, we went there. And from there, I became the OC at Elmhurst, moved on to Allegheny College where I was the OC. And then, Tim got the head job at Western Michigan, called me up and brought me in there. And I was working with special teams and predominantly on the recruiting side as the director of player personnel. And that's when you and I started following each other on social media, looking at guys. And I was really looking to get back into the offensive side. And Coach Wilkerson, who I work for now, right after COVID, he was the head coach at, U Chicago for about 8-9 seasons, had an opening as the offensive coordinator. And I went there, we had a pretty good season, and he parlayed that to come into Eastern Illinois, which was his alma mater, where he played defense and was a defensive coordinator here before he went on his journey. And ended up coming back. And my parents are both Eastern alums. My dad played hoops here, and my mom, had an academic scholarship. So it's kind of cool that I'm kind of where they're at now. Here, I started off as a special teams coordinator when I first got here, but became the OC after a couple seasons, and just been rolling it ever since.
And then so Eastern's had some prominent alumni that have obviously been into the higher level with. Correct me if I'm wrong. Coach Payton is an Eastern alumni, and I'm a Parcells guy, so I love Sean Payton. I love the old school mentality. It may not be the deal now in 2026, but I don't care. But I love it, Tony Romo, as well. So I think that's awesome that you get to, and on top of that, you get to be the OC where your parents went to school. Yeah, I think that, to walk in those buildings every day, that's got to be awesome for you as their son to be like, hey, this is where my mom and dad, they excel. So that's great stuff, Coach. So if someone were to say, Coach D, what's your philosophy offensively? And again, it can't, you don't got to be broad. You can get into specifics. Like what are some things that coaches that are going to listen to this are going to want to know?
Well, first it's be multiple, but be simple. You want to create as much multiplicity for the defense as you can through personnels, through formations, through motions, through movement. But you got to keep it simple. And I think, having been a teacher, I really try to stay honed in on my teaching roots where, I can't make concepts all over the place. I try to find words that the guys can grasp. We have one word for the same formation, whether it's 10, 11, 12, or whatever. And it's just guys go from, the extended to one guy comes in to the second guy comes in. If it's 12, and if we were to go to 13, then a third guy would come in, but it's all the same name because, the more you can stay around some of the same names, concepts, the guys hone into those pretty good. And so when we go from 12 to 10, and we use the same names for the motions that we do all the time, the guys are hearing the same things over and over. And then, when I'm packaging my pass calls, okay, it's got to be all of our, for no better reason, all of our mesh stuff is under the Texas concept, is under the Texas. So we got Longhorns, we got Aggies, we've got all these different names that fall into Texas mascots because, the big middle of Texas is there's an X, and what happens in mesh, they're Xing. All of my over-under folders is Ohio, O for over-under. And so you've got Bearcats, you've got Buckeyes, you've got all sorts of names that fit. So the guys all know when they hear Buckeyes, when they hear something from Ohio, it's an over-under concept. And just trying to package things so that guys can at least go, okay, when they first learn it, it's here. I'm in New York, it's 4 verts. I'm in, Texas, it's mesh. And then it's figuring out where they're at from there. But you can be multiple and do all sorts of different things from different formations and different personnels if the guys understand the base and where it all comes from. And as soon as they hear a word, they can kind of immediately go to, okay, this is what that is. No different than, when high school teachers are teaching in the classroom, you got to find that hook for the kids so that they're like, oh, that's what it means. It's not that hard of a concept once they can wrap their head around, whatever that hook is. So look. Go ahead.
As I say, I think those are all great points. Like, I think in today's world, and I'm sure, you do, you coaches clinics and you talk to coaches. Like, I think there's a lot of coaches that want to find like this like buzzword or this like they want to find these cool words. Coach Derickson's a college coach, so he's gonna have this cool stuff, and it's like. No, like I'm trying to teach my guys, like I'm coaching for my livelihood.
Yeah.
Right. As a college coach.
Yeah.
I want, like you said, I'm a big multiplicity by simplicity guy myself. So I think those are all phenomenal points for coaches to hear that, like, it's not like this, you see a lot of stuff on social media. It's like, here's a clip and it's all this jargon. It's like, well, can you teach that jargon?
Correct.
Right. It's not just showing the clip. It's like, can your kids do it? Right. But I think that's to me that's an awesome explanation as to how you guys operate. So spring football. So how are things going now? Like, we were talking off camera a little bit, and we all know, like, when whether it's high school or college, I'm a defensive guy, so I know the first week I'm going to be ahead of my OC. Because we're gonna match what you guys do. And we're going to be, one front, maybe 2 fronts, maybe 1 or 2 coverages. And we're going to have the upper hand. But by week 3, that may not be the case because your guys are going to get their rhythm and the quarterbacks are going to get their rhythm and the receivers and so forth. So talk about like the spring ball going on at Eastern right now.
Yeah, no, it's been great. There's been some great competitions, to what you said, the defense is a little ahead of us. As we feel like we're starting to get comfortable, all of a sudden, we get a 3-down front instead of a 4-down front, and our guys have to adapt. There's some different communication that goes along with it. We've coached it up, and we've done it in some walkthroughs, but obviously when that stuff's happening on the fly or our defense is shifting the front on the move, it happens quicker and our guys have to adapt. And with the transfer portal now, we've got new guys up front, we've got new guys in the back end, and it's not the same communication among the front 5 that you had last season where, typically you're trying to fit in for one guy. Well, we had a bunch of guys jump in the portal. We had a bunch of guys come in new. We had some guys that hung over, but not a ton of guys that had seen time for us last year on the field. So, it's 5 new guys at the offensive line working together, or 6 or 7. You get a couple of extra guys there with the ones. But it's been great. It's learning on the fly, and for some of them, it's drinking water through a fire hose. But that's part of it. But once you see it click, and once they get it, all of a sudden, our momentum starts to go a little bit, and we had a scrimmage on Saturday where we saw a lot more of the movement and the movement type stuff pieces. And it took us a while to get going. And probably 2/3 of the scrimmage was, not where we wanted it to be. But the end of the scrimmage, we ended up rolling a little bit more and getting a few touchdowns to finish things out, rolling that momentum. And it's like, it took our guys 2/3, but, I think we came out of that thing on a high note, and had a pretty good practice yesterday. Got to know another one going tomorrow. Now our defense is starting to put in the sim stuff tomorrow and Saturday when we get into the scrimmage. So it's going to be another learning curve, but it's great. We need that. I don't want to see that for the first time in the fall. I want our guys to have to not only learn how to deal with those fronts, but how to deal with adversity. I mean, that's part of the spring. It can't just be about learning the offense and learning the defense and, who are your best players. It's who can deal with adversity, because at the end of the day, that's what the fall's full of. If you're in competitive games, you need to find out who's going to step their game up or who's going to cower down because they're scared because they just got beat. And, it's just as much about the mental game and picking guys up and building them up as it is, X's and O's and being able to run zone and power to these different looks. That's been a big thing, I think, for us recently.
So question / comment, then another question. So talk about adversity. Have you seen the Rick Pitino clip when he's talking to the basketball team at St. John's at halftime at all?
I don't think so.
So I recommend it. It's right in our wheelhouse. He just talks about his team is down and they're look like they're ready to quit. And he was like, where did you come from where you're so weak mentally that you can't? And he leaves basketball out. He talks about the game of life. And he's like, at some point, this game is going to end for you. So how are you going to be able to handle not getting that job or not getting the raise, and I think for us, I think I love how you brought up the teaching aspect because so many of the coaches that are going to listen to this are going to be in education, that we're here to educate these kids on life. So I thought that was a great point. Now, do you and your DC, do you guys meet and say, okay, like you want to install your 11 personnel stuff? Does he say okay, this is what you're going to get? So you guys kind of compliment each other. How does that process go in spring ball for you?
So that actually goes in our staff room.
Okay.
And our head coach kind of sits us down and say, okay, we get both of our installs. And this is a couple weeks out before we get to spring ball. All right, here's what's going in for the offense. Here's what's going in for the defense. And then I have a column for what the defense has told us is going in so that, my offensive line coach is prepared. My receivers coach is prepared when it comes to the coverages. And then, best laid plans, something when you get hit in the face, all of a sudden it's got to change a little bit. Yep. So our installs are constantly changing. We're constantly adapting. We had gone in, we were supposed to do 2-minute tomorrow. We're not doing 2-minute tomorrow. We're going to get the sim fronts instead and work a little bit more with the red zone because we did it last week, but we wanted to kind of finalize some things and add some more things in that we saw that we liked. And that we had talked about. So our installs are now ever changing, but I would say the first 2 weeks, it's us sitting down as a staff and being like, okay, here's what's going in, and I'm explaining, some of the offensive things to the whole defense and to obviously the guys in the room. And then the defensive coordinator explains, hey, here's what's going in defensively. Here's how we do it. So we're kind of also teaching our staffs as a whole what's going on. And I appreciate that involving the whole staff into those things because, then there's no secrets. It's not, things got, misread or maybe the DC told me something I forgot to tell the O-line coach. And, it's all out there on the table. And our head coach creates a very collaborative atmosphere, and everybody feels like they have a voice in some way, shape, or form too. I think that really helps. And, because we've got some older coaches and we got some younger coaches. And, you get coaches to buy in when you give them a little bit of onus and a little bit of ownership. So when it comes down to talking about things that happen in practice, offensively or defensively, he'll go right down the list to the position coaches, not just necessarily what happened with the coordinator. It starts with the coordinator, then goes to, I'm the quarterback's coach, goes to the quarterbacks, and then boom, to everybody else.
So, all right. So before I get into the personnel stuff, I'm glad you brought the quarterback stuff up. So obviously that position, right? And again, my son's in 6th grade. He fancies himself a quarterback. I don't know where he gets his, I was a high school fullback and a linebacker. I don't know where it must be my grandfather who played in the 40s and his great grandfather on my wife's side that he gets the athletic ability from.
Or he wants to keep his head safe because you sound like, you were doing a little bit of the in the line, rocking people in the A gap type of stuff.
A little bit. We had the neck roll back in the day. You remember that, but so what I guess what can you tell coaches about quarterback recruiting?
Okay,
because I think that's a really hot topic. I think it's going to be one for a long, long time because you got I'm going to be. I talked to Coach Trey Bell about this from UNC Charlotte. I came from a high school. We ran power, counter, speed option, and waggle. Okay, I am not a 7-on-7 guy. Never have been. Never will be. I stopped by my high school today, and I had the director of the clinic stop by and talk to me about. I'm like, listen, I don't want to hear it. I said, I don't want to do it. I said it teaches my guys bad habits, and then it gets into this in high school, right? So I guess from your perspective as a college OC and a quarterback coach, what are some things that you look for in a quarterback? And it can be a high school quarterback, it can be a portal quarterback. What are some things and intangible skills? Like what are some things that you look for if you're a scholarship caliber athlete?
Yeah, I think it starts obviously with technique, and you want to make sure that he's got the arm. You want to make sure that he is able to get his feet in the right way, no matter what's happening from a defensive perspective. Guys are running up the field. I'm big on the technique part of things. I want to see a guy standing there with good posture and be able to deliver the football. But some of the intangible things, I want to see some leadership, and everybody wants the vocal guy. I love the vocal guy. Doesn't have to be the vocal guy though. I'm also good with lead by example. Sometimes those guys have to step up and, lead the charge by, being out in front in the sprints, whether it's sitting in the front row or the first two rows of meetings. And then, at the end of the day, can he process? That's the biggest thing with a quarterback. Can he process? And when you talk to a guy, especially with the transfers, when they come in, I want to hear all about their offense. Don't really care about necessarily mine. I want them to tell me how they go through and how they break down a defense, what they're looking for on their 3 favorite plays. And I have them draw them up on the board and talk to me through every piece of it, and then, well, what happens if this defensive player does this? Hey, draw up cover 3 for me, and I want to see, again, it may not be perfect. That's cool. I just want to be able to see if they can process the information. And right now, that's the biggest thing. Again, with the defense is doing so many different things and running so many different looks. He needs to be able to process it and then be confident with it. And be confident, in his understanding. And if these guys are drawing things up, well, I think we did this. It stinks, but it's kind of a red flag because you're not confident in the offense that you just came from. That's why I don't ask him to draw up our offense, because I don't expect him to be confident with that. I want him to talk about something he knows, something he's been embedded with, that, I feel like he should just exude as much confidence and as much ownership as he can over it. So the processing thing is the biggest piece. From the portal to high school, I don't get to see many guys throw from the portal, unfortunately. We've got a good budget, but from a recruiting standpoint, we're not able to get out and see everybody all over the country. And,
right.
Quarterbacks are everywhere, especially in the portal. So I do like some workout film. I like things of that nature. I like guys, showing me what they're doing and leaving the camera run. The clips are great. It gets you in the door, but I want to be able to see it from a consistent basis, play after play after play after play. The high school guys, I try to get out and see the last 3 guys we've taken. I've seen them all throw live. I've known what I'm getting myself into. I've been in their high schools. I've talked to their coaches. I've seen them interact in their communities. So I kind of have an understanding of the character, the type of guy he is, how he throws. And yet, look, everybody's going to have warts. I want to know what those warts are before, you get here, so that I have an idea and I have a little bit of a plan of where are we going to go. Okay, he struggles with this throw. So as I'm trying to build him up and build him confidence, let's stay away from those things. Let's try to build him up in this new environment before we throw him to the wolves and I make him throw a field comeback, or
right.
whatever his, wart may be. So, those are, I guess, some of the things that right now, from a quarterback perspective, I do. I want to get out and see those high school guys. I need to talk to those portal guys. A lot of them I don't necessarily offer until they get here because I need to see them process information and go through it. So, and you know what, again, kind of going back to the budget thing, we don't have a ton of money. So when it comes down to quarterbacks, I'm not going to probably be buying anybody. And as a result, I want to make sure that whoever I get, I'm getting a steal for my money. And that's checking off, a lot of those boxes.
I think those are great points. And like I always tell I learned this from Coach Brown. Don Brown's been my mentor for like 20 years. And he always said, you're the DC. He's like, your best friend needs to be the quarterback. And he's like, you need to teach the kid. You need to bring the kid in. You need to put your arm around the kid and teach him. And I've taken that to heart. Like everywhere I've been, I've always like grabbed the quarterback, hey, we're gonna and you joke with them, right? Like you're gonna, hey, we're gonna give you this today with like the sim pressure stuff. We're gonna get you, blah, blah, whatever. But like ultimately, that's the guy that makes or breaks makes you go. So
Yeah.
it's like you want to help him as much as you can. And I always talk about it. I think this is something for like this generation, taking constructive criticism consistently, and not take it like the fact that we have to start meetings with, don't take this personally, but right. It's like,
Yep.
like I can remember being grabbed on my face mask in high school and college. And it was like, yes, sir. Like, my dad worked shift work when I was growing up. My grandfather was a World War II vet that did a just like a lot of guys, lied about his age at 16 and went to the Pacific Theater, and he just, that was it. Like, yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am, and, I think that's important is because, again, like we talked about, like football is going to end at some point for these guys, and that they have to learn those things. So let's get into some football talk, Coach, as far as your philosophy. What are, I guess, give me plays out of 11 personnel that is in your install. Give me your run and a pass play that you love out of 11P.
Man. Well, I love basically we're going to go 2x2, tight end of the boundary. We're going to keep them off the ball, and we're going to run split zone. All right. And in running split zone, we're going to run the glance to the boundary. I'm going to have a man answer to the field. Typically, it's some sort of like slot fade with a hitch. So you got kind of the access, there with the hitch, but you got the slot fade if you get man to man, and just trying to induce that boundary safety down into the box so we can rip the glance behind them. Now, I love to play regularly, because if it's regular, then we're looking at MDM, and that receiver, his job is to go down and dig out, that boundary safety. So you started off by running just without the glance piece of it, go down and you got bubble to the field. That's kind of your outlet for the quarterback.
Okay.
Read the Sam in the alley with the split zone flow, but go down there and get him. Go down there and get him. All of a sudden he thinks I got to beat the receiver down. Then you tag the glance in there so that he's running right behind his ear, and we can get the ball out and we're hitting a big hitter. But set it up, with just the straight, I'm going to go down and dig out the safety, MDM with that receiver. Now, if they're playing a cover 2 and that it's not quarters or it's not roll down to cover 3, then he's got to sit out there. MDM would be the corner, and whether that's a trap corner, which our defense has given us a ton of, and it's been great for our receivers to see and really have to get underneath the guy that's in front of them instead of trying to cut somebody off that's coming downhill. Because in the fall we see a ton of quarters where we're going to see that boundary safety roll down. But our defense is now playing the trap stuff, which is helping us in terms of those receivers really learning how to dig out. But yeah, from a run game perspective, I know it's kind of 2 runs, but again, being simple, this is the same play, but making it a little bit multiple by adding in the glance to it, is kind of a day one staple for us. And then when it comes to to the pass game, I'll install 4 verts and those types of things. But I love the drive concept, the over under stuff, because I think there's tons of answers. And I love it, where you're maybe running that drive from the boundary to the field. And we're going to have the first inside receiver, that slot receiver. He's going to run a dig or a basic at about 10 yards. And over the top of him, again, we see a lot of cover 4 teams. We're going to run the post.
Yep.
So if that safety wants to drive down and try to rob the dig, we'll go over top, and I give the quarterback a shot opportunity, and then he can read it downhill from the post down to the dig, down to the drag coming underneath. Or we'll read it, basically try to read that drag first. What is that backer doing to the dig? So when the dig goes, is he going to lift with him? If he lifts with him, I got my drag coming to replace that backer. All right. If he sits, then I'm looking for my dig off of that Sam linebacker's ear, or the nickel, if you're playing a nickel deal, but off the nickel's ear into that first hole, into that first window. If the mic tries to fly over there as well and try to help out, then we'll try to hit it in the second window. And if Will wants to get nosy, then my back, if there's nobody blitzing, is going to be check and see off of his protection. So I have a nice little inside triangle for him: drag, dig, down to the back. And then if guys just want to give us access and lift into cover 3 and maybe roll to the field, then we've got a comeback on the backside where we're just going to take the access and whip it out to the other side over there, where, you throw that comeback a couple times and then you just tag the stutter later on, and that corner's coming down and we're throwing it over top of his head. So again, a day one play that you have you got shots off of it. You can add a shot if you want to off the stutter. But the quarterback's got answers everywhere, for the different coverages, the different looks that the defense could be giving us early.
So do you guys, and listen, I always, we run a ton of trap. Like I tell high school coaches, like, if you don't have trap coverage, you don't have to live in it. But I was like, if you don't have trap coverage in your package, I was like, you're especially and again, I think it's where you're at. Like down here in Florida, we see a ton of 10 and 11.
Yeah.
Up in Wisconsin, like I was talking to a coach from Wisconsin the other day. He's like, Coach, all we see is wing T, tight end wing, 20 series, 30 series. I'm like, well, trap's not going to help you. So, but I tell all the guys that face the spread teams, I'm like, it takes away the quick throws. You get extra perimeter run fit. So for you guys, like, are you operating out of the pistol? Are you on the sidecar? Like, how are you doing your RPO stuff?
We're multiple.
Okay.
We are base sidecar.
Okay.
When I get into 10, I love to be pistol because I don't want to tell you which way my back's going to be going.
Right.
We do have some same side stuff to try to keep teams off balance, but if we're going to go inside zone and, I'm going to have either your Sam or your Will, if I'm in the sidecar trying to get nosy, I'll put him in pistol and we'll face out and go either way with the bubble and all that type of stuff. So, and then we're also a mid zone team where, if we're in the mid zone, it's good out of sidecar, but you can't quite get it out the front door. You got to be in pistol and turn and actually hand that thing off to get him going and, press the edge. But it's always I don't think we've gotten out the front door on mid zone yet this spring, but we've got a ton of cut ups and, put his foot in the ground and get vertical and cutting off those backers over pursuing. And our guy's able to cut off on the backside from the pistol. So, that's been really good for us, but that's kind of, where we're at from, the backfield standpoint.
What about quarterback run game?
So I've got 4 guys in my room. I got 2 guys that, I might design a run for in the game plan. And I've got 2 guys that you're going to have to throw the ball off of this thing. And we have different ways where if you want to add a hat pre-snap, we've got words that put our back on the add-on. And if he's the thrower, he's got ways to deal it out. If he's the runner, he can look for those throws, but then he can just add on, and we're running the same. We didn't change anything for the O-line. We just told the back, hey, you're going to go here. Go block this guy for us. And so if it's a zone up front, it's still a zone up front. Nobody is the wiser. We've just made it so that he can throw it or he can run it because of the added hat. You want to add a hat, we'll take our back and we'll add his hat. So there's a little bit of quarterback run game. But last year, we had a guy who our first game of the season, he ran for 190, our quarterback. But he took a lot of hits, and he was struggling trying to continue to recuperate and get himself right after that. Now, it was his first start collegiately. He learned there were some of those hits that, he should not have run. He should have thrown the ball or thrown it away or handed it to the back. But, he was, that guy who, you love him because he's just got that emotion to him and he wanted the ball in his hand, and he put the ball in his hand maybe a couple times he shouldn't have and took some, hits that should have been the running back's ball. But you learn from those things. And, I learned if I'm going to have a quarterback runner, I am not going to allow him to run, and that's scramble too. Like he can't eject on a pass, all right, more than 2 times in a practice. Or, and if he did 2 times one day, I might go one time the next. You're not allowed to make those big plays like that because you can't take those hits in a collegiate season and expect to be healthy all year.
Right.
So, there was one thing I learned and just going back to the quarterback run game piece of it, there are ways to design it that are extremely easy. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. I ran the same exact offense with a thrower, a pocket passer the year before who maybe ran 5 times all year. But you just had the passing answers. You gave the guys both the same answers, but he knew I had to get the ball out on these passes and fit him into some tighter windows, as opposed to the guy who was the runner wasn't looking necessarily for the tight window. Do I have it? No, I'm had it up in the box. I can use this as one of my runs for the game.
So how does we talked about before 12 personnel?
Mhm.
How does that complement what you do out of 11 personnel?
We'll do a little bit of the same stuff. It's just I kind of try to look at I do a little bit of 12, but also I do 12 with 11. So I'll take an extra tight end if he's a little bit more of a savvy guy who can run some routes. I'll put him in the slot. And then, what are you going to do? You're going to treat me as 11 or are you going to treat me as 12? And if you're going to treat me as 12 and you got a Sam out there, I'm going to pick on your Sam in space. If you want to treat me as 11, then I'm going to motion my guy down, or I'm just going to set up in 12 and I'm going to pick on your nickel in the run game if that's what you want to do. So that's kind of where we used 12 the last couple of years. In the past, I've used 12, just to try to add some gaps and make sure that you guys are gap sound. And, we'll get, two tight ends to one side, some motions, whether it's a cross, whether it's back and forth, and fit those guys up, whether it's split zone and we're running, zone strong, or running zone strong with both guys going, or just using him as the back edge and running inside zone away from them, but they're crashing everything down so it could spill out, out the back door. Those are just some of the ways that if you've got those guys those big bodies that you can use in the run game, you got to use them. And you've got to test the defense to make sure, again, you don't see, like you said, you don't see a ton of 12.
No.
So if all of a sudden, you're planning on 11 and maybe some 10 and a tight end split out, well, then I've got to get into 12 and just make sure that everybody on your side of the ball is, gap responsible and has their P's and Q's taken care of.
Yeah, I think defensively, I mean, for me as a 3 safety guy, like I always have to have a plan for 12. Like if you're going to add gaps, like we're going to have to add gaps in some way, whether that's a sim pressure, whether that's alignment. It's a definite problem for defenses because to me, whether you balance us up or you give us that how you're going to treat us, or you go 3-man surface, tight end wing. To me that's where you as an offensive guy have the advantage against a defensive guy.
And when you put those two guys over there to the field, in a 3-by-1 set, and you split that receiver out, maybe not as far, you can do the same glance play. But I'm now reading the free safety, to the field side, and I'm going to run it behind his ear, because if he gets happy because he sees 2 tight ends, like, oh man, I got to be in the fit now. And he comes screaming downhill out of control. Well, shoot, we should be able to hit the same play that we were hitting to the boundary now back to the field, because again, those guys in the secondary, they see this and, oh, coach expects me to be down and helping out.
Yep.
All right, well, let's try to pull you out of position.
I think that's a great point. So then what's kind of your plan when you're looking at your 10 personnel stuff? Like what's like a base run for you? Is there a boot or anything off that base run? Like what do you look at it with 10 personnel?
Yeah, when it comes to 10, it's kind of, okay, how far are you going to split out, your Sam linebacker to the field, your Will linebacker to the boundary? Where are we going to get your extra hat from?
Got it.
In that whole deal. Like I got 5, all right, and I'm going to read somebody, but where is your extra guy coming from? And if he's going to come from the outside, then up front, we have to think a little bit more about, we got to take care of the defensive lineman as opposed to necessarily going up for the linebacker who is going to add late. Then I want to take care of the defensive line, and I want to read that linebacker that wants to kind of fill into the box. And typically it's the Will, but it could easily also be the Sam, and I'm more of an inside zone guy when we get to that, because your Sam's got my guy out leverage for the mid zone. There's no way I think my inside receiver can really go and dig him out. I got to continue to try to put him in conflict with the receiver running bubble or running an out or, getting out of there. So I got to try to get him as much width as possible. Your Will can try to add himself into the box, but same deal. That's who I've got to really hone in on. And, if we're going to out with the backside of our offensive line and, run zone to the field, out with the backside too, if it's a 4 down front, read that guy and then replace him with my inside, receiver, whether we're going to run glance from that guy, or whether we're going to send him vertical and run, kind of like a lag slant on the outside to fill that space if Will wants to jump in the box. That's where my mind goes. And then, again, if you want to try to get tighter and tighter and tighter, Now all of a sudden you're opening up my pass game where I can start hitting some things a little bit more on the edges to try to widen you guys back out. And then at the end of the day, I mean, the last couple of years, we've had some great running backs. So as we get into 10, how can I also still put the ball in the back's hand? Is it going to be a swing? Is it going to be okay, I'm going to run a concept, but then I'm going to bring him some way, shape, or form, on a free release back to the middle? Am I going to get one-on-one with the mic? Are you guys going to give me too high where I can run him down the chute, and split, the two safeties? That's what I got to find on film and really try to explain, because again, when you get into 10, still got to find time for the back, especially if teams are trying to take the back away by adding the extra hat into the box. How else can I get him the ball?
It's ironic that you say that, because before I was taking my son to tackle practice, I was watching a video with Coach Leach talking about the same thing about 10 personnel and getting the ball. And he's like, well, if these guys are spread out, we have this really good guy back here. Like, how can do we hand the ball off to him? Do we put him on a route? It's ironic that you brought that up. So I guess from a philosophic standpoint, will you go in 10? Because I know you brought up about 11 as well, with the tight end with 12. Will you go with 2 tight ends as your slots?
I typically don't do it with the slot. I will put, like, if I'm in 11, I'll put one out in the slot. Okay. But I like to, if we're going to be in 12, I like to flip them and put them on the outside, and then put my receivers on the inside. One is matchups. Are you going to keep your corners outside and cover down my tight ends? Great. All right. I'll try to hit you with speed on your safeties. But, when we get to our zone read game too, I'd rather have the tight end blocking for my receiver on that bubble than maybe something else.
Sure.
So I will invert those guys a little bit. But there's other times where I'll split them out. I'll see if you guys are going to get out with me, and then I'll try to take my tight ends and just go in and try to dig you guys out. So yeah, we've done it. We've done a little bit of both. But at the end of the day, if we're going to look like 10 personnel, but with 12 personnel, I'd rather probably invert them and keep them on the outside and run, try to get my matchups on the inside with your linebackers or nobody's gonna put a linebacker, maybe a nickel or a safety, on my receivers in that case.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how I think to, like, Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech, and I'm like, how just offensively, like, we're defending option from just different formations.
Absolutely.
As a defensive coach, I'm like, okay, you're talking about your dive read, your quarterback read, your pitch read is your glance. It's, to me, it's like it's amazing how we're still speaking the same language of like 50, 60 years ago, but it's a different deal with all the different formations. I think that's awesome. So do you see, and I brought this up to a couple other offensive guys that I've talked to, with the success that McVay had in Los Angeles this year, and obviously that whole NFC West is a Shanahan McVay train now. Do you see that 13 type philosophic base like coming down to you guys because of what he did? And I understand Stafford's a dude; he's a freaking gunslinger. Like you have to have that guy, but do you guys see pieces and bits of that like coming down to college?
A little bit, but I think at the end of the day, it's who do you have? Right. What I mean? Personnel wise, who is in your room? And like you said earlier, we were talking before this. I mean, what are my weapons? I'm not going to try to fit, our guys into a system that I don't think we can necessarily execute, from a personnel standpoint. Can we get into 10? We're finding that out right now. Are we going to be able to do that? And that's the great part about the spring. A couple of years ago, at this point, we were in 13 personnel and trying out some of those types of things. But it's who you got. And then do they fit the system of what they do? Like I said, Stafford's a dude. I've got a returning quarterback who started, half of our games, and I've got, 3 new guys that are fighting for the job. How much can we put on them? in terms of the offense. So I think at the end of the day, you'll see bits and pieces that fit your group start to fall down. But you're not going to see maybe all of it. You're going to see what fits the team. But you mentioned Shanahan, and I'm going to give Eastern a plug again. My parents went to school with Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan was an Eastern grad. He had that whole Washington staff that nowadays, oh my gosh, you look back and you go, how did they not win the Super Bowl? The minds that they had on that staff is unbelievable. But, having Coach Shanahan here a couple times and just talk about some of the things that he was able to do, we cannot not be a mid-zone team with Mike Shanahan having been here and the Terrell Davis days that he had. It's like, okay, if anything, we have to go back to our roots and make sure we got some of the Shanahan in our building and in our offense.
100%. I think RG3 stays healthy. I think it's a different deal, in Washington. So Coach, let's get into the recruiting. How, and again, like I said, you've been doing this a long time. You were a high school coach. Like, obviously when we first started way back when, it was a completely different deal. Like, how has the recruiting for you guys changed, like with your footprint for high schools and then with the portal?
Yeah, it's completely different. Everybody to some extent is in this win now mentality, and I get it. I love it. Again, it's my job. I got to win as a college coach. The development piece is starting to get lost a little bit. You graduate some guys and you just want to bring in guys that, can play right in the system. And what ends up happening is you have a bunch of guys who can play. Guys don't feel like they played enough, and then they're going to leave. And then if you take everybody who leaves and you fill them with freshmen, your team is going to be infants and it's going to be rough. And there's not a chance really you're going to win against a 22. You look at Indiana, they had 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, and you go up against a team of freshmen. It's not basketball, you can't do it. And even in basketball now, you still see some of those older teams being able to, to dominate. So, you do find a little bit more of a focus on the portal with a lot of the recruiting. This year, I again, having been a high school coach, I hate it, but we only brought in 5 freshmen, 3 offensive linemen, a quarterback, a receiver, and that's all we got. And part of that too, there were some spots that weren't open,
right?
But you got to fill some of those spots with portal guys. Defensively, it was portal guys. Is it going to be the same way next year? I don't know. But in my head, the way I look at it, like offensive linemen right now in the portal, there's an over evaluation of them. Guys are getting a ton of money who would be phenomenal FCS starters to be the second or third guy on an FBS football team. And, they see the glimmer and the money. And I don't think all of them are taking the money. I think they're betting on themselves saying, hey, I can go there and I can play and I can get in the starting lineup, where if you look at the money they're getting compared to some of the other guys, well, they think you're only going to be, a second string guy. So that kind of gets a little bit watered down. So I have a belief that you're going to have to develop and grow your offensive line, especially if you want size. Like, we're not going to be able to find a giant offensive tackle in the portal. Again, they're overvalued. They're going to get tons more money other places. Somebody's going to pay a great FCS all-conference guy to be a backup at the FBS. Okay, so we're going to have to find those guys in high schools, grow them up. Are they going to leave? Well, shoot, we just had an offensive lineman leave to go to Oregon State, in the portal this past year, who was a redshirt freshman. Thought he was going to be a dude for. Well, he took the money, and good for him. Played great for us this past year, and all the best to him. But I can't be scared to go back. He was starting for us. He started over other portal guys we brought in. So we can't be scared to recruit the high schools and try to develop guys just because we think they might leave, because I'm going to go get a portal guy who's possibly going to do the same thing.
Right.
So I don't know if everybody has that opinion. That's my opinion. I think you do have to continue to bring in a quarterback in your system, continue to grow them. And, he sees all these other guys coming in, and, I've got one that I took out of the portal, a quarterback who's been behind a bunch of guys, a couple guys that he was behind, went to the CFL. They brought in a portal guy, that started, and, he thought he was going to be the guy this year at an FBS school. And the guy that was ahead of him ended up getting a 7th year or 6th year, and, led his conference in throwing. So, we ended up having the luxury of getting him. So he's been behind and seen a lot. It's now going to be, can you do it, yourself on the field, and, can you beat out some of the other guys? But, that's what you got to read through. And you're always looking, it's always hard, especially with portal. What's the attitude they're going to bring to your program?
Right.
We are more of we're going to try to find the Division II all conference, all American. We're going to try to find the D3 all American, because those guys got chips on their shoulder. A lot of times the Power 4, FBS kids, they get to an FCS school, and, if you don't have everything going on, the glitz and the glamour, and, the spa in the training room now that a lot of them got, they're going to thumb their nose at you, and you're not going to get a great teammate. You're not going to get, the most out of that guy because he believes he's better. So we're looking for the guys with chips on their shoulder, and from a portal that takes some work trying to find, but when you find the right ones, it works out pretty well. And I do think we've got a really good, everybody says culture, but, we do have a good culture. We have a great locker room where guys on visits are going to weed out the guys that don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And we take, that advice from our guys, like, seriously, hey, coach, he ain't going to work out. Like, this, and this happened. All right, we're good. Hey, appreciate you coming, but, we can't do it if you're not going to fit the locker room. That's part of it. I do think you can find some steals because of the portal in high school recruiting. Therefore you can't completely turn your back to it, but, it's gotten completely different from what it used to be, back in 2017 when I started as the DPP at Western Michigan.
Yep.
Completely different landscape, and the money, brings another impact to the whole deal. And, are guys looking for the best situations now, or are guys looking for the dollar? And that could have something to do with where you come from. And I don't fault anybody for taking the dollar. I get it. But at the same time, you can multiply those dollars if you find the right situation, and I think all of us understand as coaches, the older ones do, like, hey, I might have to take a less paying job, but I know I'm going to learn more from this head coach, from this coordinator, from this position coach, to further myself down the road, and take that step back to take 2 steps forward. But we're talking now about 17 to 21-year-old kids who I don't think understand that fully. And again, we're educators. We got to educate.
Yep. I think that's awesome. And to me, I take from that, like, and a lot of coaches that I've talked to, they talk about the portal, you're recruiting it out of position necessity. Like there's a lot of guys that, I think there's a lot of coaches across the country that just do it just to do it, because it's what they think they need to do. But the 2 things I took out of what you just said is development of the kids. And also you're going to look at the portal, but you want to look at the portal for A, the right fit, and B, the position necessity. So whether that's offensively or defensively, that's what you guys are looking for.
Yes, sir.
What is, if there's a high school quarterback that's gonna watch this, talk about your quarterback room, talk about you guys meeting, your culture that you try to establish, your standards and your expectations.
Yeah. I get chills sometimes when I think about my quarterback room, because everybody in this room wants to be the guy. Everybody wants to be the top dog. But nobody treats anybody else in this room like they're any lesser. Sometimes people feel like, if they want to be the top dog, they got to make sure they're looking down on everybody. Nobody does that. We're very open. We have a very, there's a lot of open communication about where guys stand, where guys are, as not just this room, but our personnel in general, because as a quarterback, you need to understand the personnel of your offense, because when you get out there, you need to know whether that matchup is good or that matchup's not. And I'd want to look away from it. But, you want to exude confidence, but you can't be overconfident. There is definitely a fine line right there that some guys understand and some guys don't. Now you're going to get this reference. I don't know if anybody else is, but we cannot have an Eddie Haskell in our room. And for those guys who don't get the reference, it's the fake guy. The guy who, is chummy with everybody, but then goes home and then does look down on everybody else. We need the guy who is truly himself in this room. Because again, when it comes to that position, you are the leader. You are the coach on the field. And people have to know the real you, because when stuff gets hard, when your back's against the wall, we're on the, -1 and we got to go out, they need to be able to trust you. They need to be able to hear your communication, and they need to be able to know what they're going to get at the line of scrimmage when you're going to ask for that football. And they got to know that if they do their job right, that you're going to basically cash in their check. And you're going to get them the money for it. So we need to be, again, ourselves. We need to be great people. We need to understand and be able to process everything, ins and outs, all those types of things. So, one of the things that I'm just going to kind of get into a drill real fast, but if we're doing just bag drills and we're stepping through and we're sliding up, I'm not giving them commands. I'm giving them pass game signals. I'm giving them our run game signals, and they're telling me what they're seeing, because I need them to process what I'm doing while they're going through everything that they're going through. No different than they're going to have to look down the field and process a defense when they're taking their steps, keeping their eyes up, moving in the pocket. They need to process what's going on. So I'll start off with just, hey, 5, 4, 3, and give them numbers, and they can spout them off. But then as we get into more and more drills, I'm giving them the signals for the pass game as if they were getting them from the sideline, and they're calling off, whatever it may be in those concepts, Bearcats as they're going through. And then finally, when I get to the end and I clap and they can throw the football, again, it's part of the processing. So I'm challenging them in here with processing, with film, with getting on the board. Everybody's got to be comfortable on the board. I'm going to have one guy get up. He's going to write the play. The other guy's going to get up and he's going to signal it. We are a huddle team. We do have the helmet communication, but when we go 2-minute, or we had the huddle system go down a couple times, or the communication go down a couple times, we got to signal it out. So those guys are going to signal it in the room so that they're working on the signals. So you're on an island a lot in here. And again, I'm looking for you to be you. I'm looking for you to process. If you don't know, ask. All right. If you think there's something that, you have a question about, make sure that it comes out. Don't think just verify. No different than when you're on the field. If you want to verify, I'm going to fake clap, because I'm going to verify that backer's coming. Okay. Hey, here we go. Back you go here, blah, 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 and let's go. So I try to treat kind of everything as if they're going to be on the field, and I'm going to challenge them. I'm going to pressure them if I can. But then we're going to have some fun. I'm going to pull up, a little game online, and we're going to go through it real fast. And I'll have done it beforehand, because I'm going to challenge them, say, hey, I got this done without missing one in this time. Good luck. Here you go. So stuff like that. I mean, when I was at U Chicago, it was a little different. I mean, I had a different quarterback put up a different brain teaser on the board every day. I was lost. I mean, U Chicago, you need a 33 ACT to get in there. So I was in the wrong room. From a football, I was in the right room, but but you got to find ways to get them involved and get them to be themselves. I've seen quarterbacks come in and, they are puckered up, and that's okay, but loosen up, So I want guys to loosen up here. I want to get them out there. I'm going to challenge them. If they get puckered up, we're time to loosen up, and then we keep going.
Coach, this is awesome, man. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. I know you're in the thick of it, man. So any coaches that want to reach out to you, contact you about their kids, any drill questions, anything like that, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter, Coach Derickson. And I'll be honest, when it comes to coaches, I'll follow everybody back. I don't mind. When it comes to kids, if I can't talk to them, if they're a 29, if they're a 30, I don't follow them back, because, again, I'm not going to get into that compliance gray area where he reaches out. I don't know he's a 30. And so, KMDerickson eiu.edu. That's my email. You can find it on the website too. Any of those ways. I'm backlogged right now on my email, but I try to get out of it. I try to hit everybody back. Again, I was a high school coach and, trying to help get my guys seen or whatnot. So, I've been there. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to be good, great people too, and I want to be one of those guys that, people say, hey, he might've hated my guy, but he got back to me. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's Twitter, at Coach Derickson or, my email address. Those are the best ways.
Awesome, Coach. Well, listen, I wish you, it's sim pressures tomorrow. So I wish you guys luck.
Appreciate it.
I'll be as a defensive guy, I'll be pulling for you. But listen, I appreciate you, and I wish you the best of luck in spring, and obviously in the fall. And anytime you're down in Naples, hit me up, and
Yes,
we'll be talking soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.